Risen from the grave! I got up like 5 minutes ago. Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and today we're going to talk about flex slots in the Golgari Graveyard deck in Standard. Now, if you're looking for an overview of the deck or a sideboard guide of the deck, I posted those on the channel. You should totally check those out. Today we're just looking at cards you pretty much have to play and what you can play in those flex slots. Let's jump into it. So these are the non-flex slots. If you're playing the Golgari Graveyard deck, you're pretty much bought into playing these cards, these 51 cards in the main deck, and these 3 cards in the sideboard. But that's really not what this video is about. This video is about what 9 cards do you play in the main deck to add to these cards, and what 12 cards do you play in the sideboard to add to these cards. So if you want to look at the things that are not flex, feel free to pause the video. We're going to move on to our flex slots. These are our options. We're going to pick 9 of these 17 cards for the main deck, and we're going to pick 12 of these 28 cards for the sideboard. So let's talk about this. We can play the fourth 9 Vermin. 9 Vermin is a 1/1 black creature. When it enters, mill 2 cards. And when it dies, target creature you don't control gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And so this is a creature that puts things in our graveyard, which is exactly what this deck is attempting to do. When we sack it to Souls of the Lost, it can kill an X1, which is kind of nice. And it blocks really, really well, being able to block and then give something -1/-1. It doesn't really do much else though, and often just like sits on the battlefield, so that can be kind of rough. We can play 4 C-Nut Scout. It's a 1-mana 1/1. When it enters, it explores. Exploring allows us to fill up our graveyard. This gives us a solid 1-mana play to either apply pressure or block, and can dig lands off the top. We can play 4 Molt Tender. Molt Tender is a 1-mana 1/1. We can tap it to mill a card, which being able to mill a card every turn is awesome. And we can exile a card from our graveyard to add 1 mana of any color, which combos really well with 9 Vermin and frankly most of our deck. The idea is our graveyard is going to be full anyway. Pretty much every card in our deck, 1 mana and 2 mana card in our deck, puts cards into our graveyard. So essentially it's a mana dork with a little bit of upside. We can play 4 Rumblebelt Maverick. It's a 1-mana 1/1. When it enters, Surveil 2. So again, another way to filter draws and put things in our graveyard. And we can exile Rumblebelt Maverick from our graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. So since we're filling our graveyard with a bunch of stuff, if this ends up in our graveyard, which is bound to happen, we can continue to get value out of it. We can play 2 Dredger's Insight. Dredger's Insight is a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever 1 or more artifact or creature cards leave your graveyard, you gain 1 life. When this enchantment enters, mill 4 cards. You may put an artifact, creature, or land card from among the mill cards into your hand. This is a way to fill up our graveyard. This is a way to gain a little bit of incidental life, because there's a lot of things that have removed stuff from our graveyard, especially comboed with things like Molt Tender, and allows us to dig for things that we need. We could also play 2 Season of Loss. Season of Loss is a 5-mana sorcery where we choose 5 paws worth of modes. 1 paw is each player sacrifices a creature of their choice. 2 paws is draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. And 3 paws is each opponent loses X life for X the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This is a way to kind of seal the door on our opponent, because we're going to have a lot of creatures in our graveyard at any given time. And so being able to just like put additional creatures in our graveyard and then 3-paw them, they lose X life, is really, really disgusting. So we're going to be selecting 9 of these 17 cards to add to our main deck. As far as the sideboard goes, again, we're looking for 12 of these cards. We could be playing 2 Cut Down. Destroy target creature, total power and toughness 5 or less, 1-mana instant. We'd be playing this card to shore up our aggro matchups. We can play 2 Duress. It's a 1-mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand, choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. The player discards that card. This is great against domain and blue-white control. We could play 3 Malicious Eclipse. It's a 3-mana sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature an opponent controls would die this turn, exile it instead. Really good against aggressive decks and Convoke and stuff like that. Also, the exile is really relevant against like Enduring Innocence and Heartfire Hero. We play a Leyline of the Void. Leyline of the Void is decent graveyard hate. If it's in our opening hand, we can start with it on the battlefield, and if a card we put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Just really good graveyard hate that we don't have to invest mana in. We could be playing a Starving Revenant. It's a 4-mana 4/4. When Starving Revenant enters, Surveil 2, then for each card you put on top of your library, you draw a card and lose 3 life. So this is a way to not only fill up our graveyard, but also like dig. We want this against decks that our life total doesn't really matter and go very, very slow against us, where card advantage is super important. It has Descend 8. Whenever you draw a card, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life, which makes it kind of a must answer. We could be playing 3 Terror Tide. Terratide's a 4-mana sorcery, has Fathomless Descent. All creatures get -X till end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, which means you get like minus infinite. The unfortunate part of this being a sideboard card is that if your opponent has decent graveyard hate, it's kind of hard to have Terratide actually be a board wipe, where Malicious Intent, while it has a lower, like significantly lower ceiling, it's always a board wipe, so it's kind of tough to choose between the two. If you're playing a third Harvester of Misery, we already were playing 2 in the main, we could play a third in the side. It's a 5-mana 5/4 with Menace, and when it enters, other creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. And we can discard Harvester of Misery, target creature gets -2/-2 till end of turn, and pay 2 mana. So this is a decent board wipe on a body, which is awesome. And then in the early game, it can stop that aggro while putting permanents on our graveyard rather than using an instant or sorcery, which is pretty powerful. We play in 2 Paw Patch formation. It's a 2-mana instant. Choose one, destroy target creature with flying, or destroy target enchantment, or draw a card and create a food token. This is really good against any deck with enchantments or big creatures with flying that we care about. And the best part about this is that we can kind of cash it in and just create a food token. It doesn't really go along with our primary strategy that well, but sometimes sideboard cards can't when they're trying to neuter our opponent's decks. We can be playing 2 Voracious Varmint. It is a 2-mana with 2/2 with Vigilance, and we can pay 1 mana and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. This is great artifact and enchantment hate that puts a permanent into our graveyard. We could be playing 3 Scrap Shooter. It's a 3-mana 4/4 with Reach, and we can gift a card. When it enters, if the gift was promised, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. The beautiful part about this is not only is it artifact or enchantment hate, unfortunately you have to gift a card for it, but also a 4/4 with Reach is so good against aggro decks. It is so good against the self-bounce decks, and it's just like applies a lot of pressure. We could be playing 2 more Obstinate Baloth, so Obstinate Baloth 2 and 3. It is a 4-mana 4/4, it enters, gain 4 life. The ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Obstinate Baloth, put it on the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. So this is mostly for Hopeless Nightmare, being able to start the game with it on the battlefield. If your opponent turn 1's Hopeless Nightmare, we just discard it and put it on the battlefield. But it's also decent against the aggro decks. We could be playing 2 Thrun Breaker of Silence. It's a 5-mana 5/5. It can't be countered, and it has trample. It can't be the target of non-green spells your opponent control or abilities from non-green sources your opponent control. And during your turn, Thrun has indestructible. This is a card you would play against decks that go really long, and it's really important that you apply a ton of pressure. It for sure gets down. It needs to be answered with a board wipe, and it can attack into pretty much anything, which we love. We could be playing 1 Maelstrom Pulse. Maelstrom Pulse is a 3-mana sorcery, destroy target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. This is just pretty unconditional removal. Sometimes we might need that. And then we could be playing 2 Ghost Vacuum, just additional graveyard hate. It's a 1-mana artifact. You can tap it to exile target card from a graveyard. And then we can pay 6 mana and tap it to sacrifice Ghost Vacuum, put each creature card exiled with Ghost Vacuum onto the battlefield under your control with a flying counter on it. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types, activate only as a sorcery. So Ghost Vacuum is pretty powerful graveyard hate. However, it doesn't deal with the entire graveyard like Leyline of the Void might, but it has a pretty sweet upside for the deep late game if it's never answered and you just exile things all the time. So we're going to be selecting 12 of these 28 cards to add to our non-flex slots. Again, we're going to be selecting 9 of these 17 cards. And once you do that, you have your very own but stock version of Golgari Graveyard in Standard. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.